Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin.
Sloane Whitaker stood at her kitchen counter, arranging the last of the fresh strawberries on the fruit platter, each berry positioned just so, stems removed, the red flesh glistening under the morning light that streamed through her small window. The same counter where she'd prepared 15 Mother's Day brunches before this one. The same modest kitchen in her small Corvallis home, with its chipped linoleum that she'd learned to ignore and the refrigerator that hummed too loud but still kept food cold. She checked her watch, a simple Timex she'd owned for 12 years. 11:30. They'd be here soon. The dining table groaned under the weight of her preparations. Homemade quiche with spinach and Gruyere, fresh biscuits that had risen perfectly in the oven, honey butter she'd churned herself using cream from the local dairy, fruit salad with mint from her back garden, and the Belgian waffles Cora used to love as a child. Everything made from scratch like always. Everything perfect like always. The way her own mother had taught her before they stopped speaking. She'd been up since 6 a.m., mixing batter and rolling dough, the same ritual she'd performed every year. The same careful attention to detail that had characterized every meal she'd ever made for her daughter. The front door opened without a knock. Cora never knocked anymore. Hadn't for years, not since she'd married into money and decided her childhood home was just another stop on her social calendar. "Mom, we're here." Cora's voice carried that bright, practiced tone she used for charity events and business dinners. Sloane wiped her hands on her apron, the same blue apron with tiny flowers that Cora had given her for Christmas when she was 10, and walked to the living room. Cora stood in the doorway wearing a cream-colored dress with subtle beading around the neckline. The kind of dress that looked simple, but probably cost more than Sloane's monthly grocery budget. Behind her, Pamela Jensen examined Sloane's living room with the same careful attention she might give to a piece of furniture at an estate sale, cataloging flaws and estimating value. Pamela wore pearls and a navy suit that fit like it had been made for her body, specifically, which it probably had been. Her silver hair was swept back in a perfect chignon, not a strand out of place despite the Oregon humidity. "Everything looks wonderful, dear," Pamela said, though her eyes lingered on the worn couch cushions where the pattern had faded, the family photos in their drugstore frames, the bookshelf made of boards and cinder blocks that Sloane had assembled herself 20 years ago. Cora kissed Sloane's cheek, her perfume expensive and floral. "You outdid yourself again. It smells amazing in here. What time did you get up to make all this?" "Just the usual time," Sloane said. "Please sit. I'll bring everything out." "Oh, let me help." Cora started toward the kitchen, but her movement was half-hearted, automatic. She was already looking toward the table, toward Pamela, toward anywhere but her mother's eyes. "No need. You're the guest." Sloane's voice held no warmth, just the efficient politeness she'd learned to use with difficult library patrons. She returned with the first platter, the quiche, golden and perfect, exactly the way Cora used to beg for when she was 12 and going through a sophisticated food phase. Then the second platter with the biscuits and honey butter. Then the third with fresh fruit arranged like a still life painting. Pamela settled into the chair at the head of the table, the chair that used to be Sloane's father's, back when she still had a father, back when she still had a family that claimed her, back when Sunday dinners meant something more than obligation and performance. "This looks delicious, Sloane," Pamela said, cutting a precise bite of quiche with the silver fork Sloane had inherited from her grandmother. "Very homey. You can tell it's made with love." The word homey hung in the air like smoke. Not elegant, not refined, just homey. Cora shot her mother-in-law a quick look, then smiled too brightly at Sloane. "Mom's always been an incredible cook. Remember those Saturday morning pancakes, Mom? When I was little, you'd make them in different shapes, animals, and flowers and things." "I remember." Sloane poured orange juice into 3 glasses, the expensive crystal ones she saved for special occasions. Fresh squeeze, of course, because Cora had once mentioned that she preferred fresh to frozen. The conversation flowed around safe topics like water around stones. Pamela's recent trip to Paris, where she'd purchased a 17th century armoire for one of her stores. Cora's new position at the marketing firm, where she was developing campaigns for luxury brands. The weather, which had been unusually warm for May in Oregon. Sloane listened and responded when necessary, asking polite questions about hotel recommendations and client meetings. But her attention kept drifting to Cora's hands as she gestured while talking. Manicured nails painted a soft pink that probably had a name like Rose Petal or Morning Blush. Diamond wedding ring with matching band. Tennis bracelet that caught the light every time she reached for her coffee cup. Everything coordinated. Everything expensive. Everything Sloane had never been able to provide. The campaign is for a jewelry company, Cora was saying, her voice animated in a way it hadn't been when she was talking to her mother. High-end pieces, the kind that sell for more than most people make in a year. It's challenging work, figuring out how to make people want something they can't afford. Well, desire is the foundation of all commerce, Pamela said, dabbing her lips with her napkin. People buy dreams as much as products. You understand that instinctively, dear. It's why you're so good at what you do. Cora beamed under the praise, like a flower turning toward sunlight. Oh, Cora suddenly brightened even more, if that was possible. Before I forget, we have gifts. I know we usually do this after brunch, but I'm too excited to wait. She reached for 2 small gift bags beside her chair, one designer bag with thick handles and tissue paper that crinkled expensively, another simple paper bag from a department store. From the expensive bag, she pulled a rectangular box wrapped in silver paper with a white silk bow that had been tied by professional hands. Happy Mother's Day, Pamela. Cora's smile was radiant as she handed the box across the table with the ceremony usually reserved for religious artifacts. Pamela's fingers worked delicately at the wrapping, careful not to tear the expensive paper. Underneath was pristine white cardboard embossed with elegant gold lettering. Cartier. She lifted the lid to reveal a watch nestled in black silk, like a precious gem. Oh, my dear. Pamela lifted the watch from its cushion, holding it up to catch the morning light streaming through Sloane's simple curtains. This is a Cartier Tank Française. I've admired these for years. The watch was stunning. Gold and diamonds, the kind of timepiece that would be passed down through generations. The kind of gift that spoke of serious money and serious thought. I know. You mentioned it when we were shopping in Portland last month. I thought, well, you've been so wonderful to me, like a real mother. Cora's voice was soft, reverent. You've taught me so much about style, about business, about how to carry myself in the world. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sloane's fork paused halfway to her mouth, a bite of quiche growing cold on the silver tines. $10,000, Pamela whispered, examining the tiny price tag that was still discreetly attached to the band. Cora, darling, this is far too generous. Nothing's too generous for you. Cora beamed as Pamela fastened the watch around her wrist, both women admiring how the gold complemented Pamela's complexion, how the diamonds caught every ray of light. You deserve beautiful things. You appreciate them the way they should be appreciated. It's absolutely perfect, Pamela said, extending her arm to better display the watch. I'll treasure it always. It's beautiful, Sloane said quietly, because something needed to be said and silence would have been more damning than words. Cora turned to her then, eyes still bright with the satisfaction of having pleased Pamela so completely. Oh, Mom, I have something for you too. I almost forgot. She reached into her regular purse, not the designer bag, just her everyday black leather purse that she'd carried for 2 years, and pulled out a small plastic package, the kind they sold at checkout counters next to the magazines and candy bars. Inside, visible through the clear plastic, Sloane could see a pair of white cotton socks with number 1 Mom stitched in pink thread across the toes. The stitching was already slightly loose, the threads puckering the fabric. "I saw them at the grocery store and thought of you," Cora said, sliding the package across the table past the expensive crystal and the fine china. "They were right there by the register when I was buying coffee filters." Sloane picked up the socks. The plastic crinkled between her fingers. A small price sticker on the back read $14.99 in red numerals. $15 for 30 years of sacrifice. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "I thought they were cute. Practical. You're always saying you need more socks for work." Cora's tone was casual, distracted, already turning back toward Pamela and the glittering watch. "Yes, I am always saying that." Pamela cleared her throat delicately. "Well, aren't these charming? Very practical, as you said." The word practical landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through the careful politeness of the meal. The rest of brunch passed in a blur of compliments about the food and small talk about summer vacation plans. Pamela admired her watch 3 more times, holding her wrist at different angles to catch the light. Cora took several photos of Pamela wearing one of just the watch, another of them together with Pamela's arm extended to show off the Cartier, a third of them both laughing at something Pamela had said about Paris fashion, and one took a picture of Sloane with her socks, and one asked about her summer plans, and one complimented the meal beyond the initial politeness. When they finally left, Cora hugged her goodbye, the same brief, perfunctory embrace she'd been giving since she married Brad. "Thanks for everything, Mom. This was perfect, like always. The food was incredible. I'm glad you enjoyed it. We should get together more often. Maybe I could take you to lunch next week." It was an empty offer, the kind people made when they felt guilty but had no intention of following through. "That would be nice," Sloane said, knowing the lunch would never happen. "Drive safe," she added as they walked toward Cora's BMW. She stood in her doorway, watching the car pull away, Pamela in the passenger seat adjusting her new watch. Both women probably already discussing their afternoon plans. Shopping, perhaps. Or tea at the country club where Sloane had never been invited despite her daughter being a member. The Cartier watch glinted on Pamela's wrist through the car window as they drove away. Sloane closed the door and looked at the socks still sitting on her dining table, next to the empty Cartier box and the scattered tissue paper. She picked up both items and walked to her bedroom, setting the expensive white box on her dresser where it looked absurdly elegant next to her simple wooden jewelry box and plastic bottle of drugstore moisturizer. The socks she dropped into her laundry basket on top of her work clothes and the towels that had seen better days. Then she returned to the dining room and began clearing the dishes from her 15th Mother's Day brunch, loading the good china into the dishwasher piece by piece. That evening, Sloane sat in her reading chair, a threadbare recliner she'd bought used 15 years ago with a cup of chamomile tea, and let her mind wander backward through the years. Not by choice the memories came anyway, uninvited and sharp as broken glass. She was 19 when she found out she was pregnant. 19 and scared and completely alone when she finally worked up the courage to tell her parents over Sunday dinner. Her father had been carving the roast, the same ritual he'd performed every weekend for as long as she could remember. Her mother had been serving vegetables from her best serving dishes, the ones they only used for family meals. Sloane could still see her father's face when she spoke the words, the way the color drained from his cheeks, then rushed back in a wave of red anger, the way his hand tightened on the carving knife until his knuckles went white. "You've ruined everything," her mother had said before Sloane had even finished explaining. "Everything we've worked for, everything we've planned." Her parents had worked 2 jobs, each to buy their house, to send Sloane to college, to build the kind of life they'd never had growing up. They'd sacrificed and saved and dreamed of their daughter becoming something more than they'd been able to become. And she'd gotten pregnant by a boy who disappeared the moment she told him the news. "You have a choice," her father had said, setting down the carving knife with deliberate care. You can take care of this problem, or you can leave. But you can't do both. You can't stay here and ruin our family's reputation. Take care of the problem. That's how he'd put it. Like her baby was a stain on the carpet or a broken window that needed fixing, she'd chosen Cora. She'd chosen love over security, hope over certainty, her unborn daughter over the family that had raised her. The years that followed blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and determination. Working at the campus bookstore during the day, stocking shelves and helping students find textbooks. Cleaning offices at night after Cora was asleep, scrubbing toilets and emptying trash cans while other people her age were at parties or studying in groups. Studying herself between feedings and diaper changes. Reading textbooks while Cora napped in a dresser drawer because cribs cost money Sloane didn't have. Writing papers on a typewriter she'd bought at a pawn shop, the keys sticking and the ribbon fading. But it worked, and that was what mattered. She'd graduated with her degree in library science when Cora was 2, walking across the stage in a cap and gown she'd borrowed from another student, while Cora watched from the audience in the arms of Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor who sometimes babysat for free. But graduating was just the beginning. Every year brought new challenges, new expenses, new ways for Sloane to prove her love through sacrifice. When Cora turned 5, Sloane took a second job stocking shelves at a grocery store to pay for private kindergarten. Not because the public school wasn't good enough, but because Cora was bright and curious and deserved every advantage Sloane could provide. When Cora wanted piano lessons at age 7, Sloane worked weekend shifts at a catering company, serving food at weddings and corporate events, while Cora practiced scales on a rented piano when Cora needed school clothes each fall. Sloane shopped at thrift stores for herself, finding decent blouses and slacks that she could make presentable with careful mending, and spent her clothing budget at department stores for her daughter. Cora always had new shoes, new backpacks, new dresses for school pictures. High school brought its own expenses, SAT prep courses, college application fees, a class ring that cost $300 but meant everything to a 17-year-old girl who wanted to fit in with her classmates. College had been the hardest sacrifice of all. Private college, because Cora's grades were good enough and she deserved the best education money could buy. Sloane had worked 3 jobs that year, the library during the day, data entry at a temp agency at night, and weekend shifts at a department store during the busy seasons. She'd eaten peanut butter sandwiches for dinner and told Cora she wasn't hungry when there wasn't enough food for 2 proper meals. She'd worn her winter coat indoors to save on heating bills and told Cora the thermostat was broken when her daughter complained about the cold. The student loans had come after graduation. $60,000 in debt that Cora never knew about because Sloane had quietly taken over the payments, sending money every month without fanfare or expectation of gratitude. Just another expense, another way of showing love through financial sacrifice. Then came the engagement, the wedding planning, the gradual realization that her daughter was moving into a world where Sloane would never truly belong. She could still see Cora standing in an expensive bridal shop surrounded by fabric samples and flower arrangements, her face glowing with happiness and possibility, explaining in careful, gentle words why her mother couldn't be in the wedding party. "Pamela has very specific ideas about the ceremony," Cora had said, adjusting her veil in the 3-way mirror. "She thinks it should be refined, elegant, classic. You understand, don't you?" Sloane had understood perfectly. She'd understood that refined meant not working class. Elegant meant not thrift store clothes and home-cut hair. Classic meant not the kind of woman who cleaned offices and counted pennies. She'd sat in the 3rd row at the wedding, behind Pamela's bridge club friends and book club members. She'd worn a navy dress from Target and sensible shoes from Payless, watching her daughter marry into a family that had everything Sloane had never been able to provide. The reception had been worse, held at the country club where Pamela was a founding member, surrounded by people who spoke casually about vacation homes and private schools and investment portfolios. Sloane had sat at a table near the back with relatives of the groom she'd never met, making small talk about the weather while Cora danced with her new husband under lights that cost more than Sloane's annual salary. During the mother-son dance, Pamela had glided across the floor with Brad in her designer gown and her pearls, every inch the society matron. When the DJ called for the mother-daughter dance, Cora had looked toward Sloane's table with something that might have been regret, but then Pamela had whispered something in her ear and they danced together instead. Pamela's been like a second mother to me, Cora had explained later, when Sloane asked why she hadn't been invited to dance. She helped plan everything. She knows how these things are supposed to go. Now Sloane sat in her reading chair, looking at the cheap socks on her coffee table. $15. For the woman who'd given up everything: her youth, her dreams, her family, her chance at love, her financial security, her social standing. Her phone buzzed against the side table. A text from Cora. Thanks again for today. The food was amazing as always. Hope you like the socks. They reminded me of you. Practical and sweet. Zoxo practical and sweet. Like a pair of $15 socks. Sloane read the message twice, then set the phone aside without responding. She'd given Cora everything she had, everything she was, everything she could ever hope to become. She'd worked herself to exhaustion, sacrificed her youth and her health and her chances at happiness. She'd gone without food, without heat, without new clothes, without vacations, without any of the small pleasures that made life bearable, and Cora had given her socks from a grocery store checkout line, while giving her real mother the one who mattered now, the one who was worthy of respect and expensive gifts, a $10,000 Cartier watch. Sloane picked up the socks and examined them more closely. The fabric was thin, already pilling slightly where it had rubbed against the plastic packaging. The pink stitching was uneven, done by machine in some factory where speed mattered more than quality. They'd probably fall apart after a few washes, the letters fading and the seams coming loose. Just like everything else in her relationship with her daughter, Monday morning brought the first call at 7:15 a.m. Sloane was getting ready for work, braiding her gray hair in the simple style she'd worn for years, when her phone started ringing. She saw Cora's name on the screen and let it go to voicemail. That'd be why the time she arrived at the library, there were 3 more missed calls and 2 text messages. Mom, are you okay? You didn't answer last night. Just wanted to make sure you got home safe after we left. Nina Alder was already at her desk in the research department when Sloane walked past, her short gray hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. She looked up from her computer screen with the sharp attention of someone who missed nothing. You look tired, Nina said without preamble. It wasn't really a question. Long weekend, Sloane replied, settling into her own workstation. It'd be why lunch. There were 7 more missed calls and 5 additional text messages. The phone vibrated constantly in Sloane's desk drawer, an insistent reminder of her daughter's growing desperation. Someone's desperate to reach you, Nina observed when they sat down together in the small break room. She'd brought her usual lunch, a turkey sandwich on whole wheat bread, an apple, and black coffee in a thermos that had seen better days. Sloane pulled out her own lunch leftover soup from the weekend and crackers she'd brought from home. My daughter. What did you do? Forget her birthday. Gave her socks for Mother's Day. Nina paused with her sandwich halfway to her mouth. Come again. She gave me socks. $15 socks from the grocery store, while giving her mother-in-law a $10,000 Cartier watch. Jesus. Nina set down her sandwich and leaned back in her plastic chair. That's brutal. What did you say? Thank you. That's it. What was I supposed to say? Sorry, my gift isn't expensive enough. Thank you for valuing me at $15. The phone buzzed again in Sloane's bag. Call number 11. Aren't you going to answer? Nina asked, glancing at the bag like it might explode. No. She's nervous. She knows she crossed a line. Sloane looked at Nina across the small Formica table. They'd worked together for 3 years but had never really talked about personal things. Nina kept her private life private, and Sloane respected that. But something about this moment felt different, more honest. She didn't cross the line, Sloane said quietly. She erased it. Nina studied her face with the careful attention she usually reserved for legal documents. How long are you planning to keep this up? As long as it takes. For what? Sloane wrapped up the rest of her soup. It had gone cold while they talked, but she'd eat it anyway. Waste wasn't something she could afford in food or in emotion. For her to understand what she's lost. The afternoon brought 6 more calls and a stream of increasingly desperate text messages. Mom, please call me back. I'm starting to worry. Did something happen? Are you sick? I don't understand why you're not answering. Please just let me know you're okay. Sloane worked at the reference desk, helping patrons find books and answers to research questions. An elderly man looking for information about his grandfather's military service in World War II. A college student writing a paper about the history of logging in Oregon. A mother with 3 young children trying to find picture books about dinosaurs for her 5-year-old son. Simple problems with simple solutions. People who appreciated help when it was offered. People who said thank you and meant it. Her phone continued buzzing in her bag like an angry wasp. Each vibration felt like an accusation, a demand for attention she was no longer willing to give. At 4 o'clock, Nina appeared at the reference desk with a cup of coffee and a determined expression. We need to talk, she said. My office. Now. Nina's office was small and cluttered with legal texts and filing cabinets. She'd worked as a paralegal for 15 years before taking the library job, and she'd kept her research skills sharp. The walls were covered with certificates and awards, evidence of a woman who took pride in doing things properly. Sit, Nina said, pointing to the chair across from her desk. Sloane Saturday, tell me about your daughter. It wasn't a request, S.O. Sloane told her, about the pregnancy at 19 and the choice that had cost her everything, about working 3 jobs to pay for private school and college, about the wedding where she wasn't good enough for the bridal party, about the monthly checks she'd been sending for 6 years to help with expenses, about the gradual realization that she'd raised a stranger who valued her at exactly $15. Nina listened without interrupting, her face revealing nothing. When Sloane finished, they sat in silence for several minutes. You know what this is about, Nina finally said. What? Respect. She doesn't respect you. The words hit like cold water. Simple and brutal and absolutely true. She loves me, Sloane said, but even she could hear how weak it sounded. Maybe, but she doesn't respect you. And without respect, love doesn't mean much. Sloane's phone buzzed again. Call number 17. What are you going to do about it? Nina asked. I don't know. Yes, you do. Nina was right. Sloane did know. She'd known since the moment she'd opened that plastic package and seen the cheap socks inside. She'd known when she watched Cora photograph Pamela's expensive watch. She'd known when her daughter had called another woman like a real mother. I'm going to stop pretending it doesn't matter, Sloane said. Good. Now, what else are you going to do? At 5 o'clock, Sloane drove home through the quiet streets of Corvallis, past the campus where she'd struggled through night classes while 7 months pregnant, morning sickness making it hard to concentrate on lectures about cataloging systems and information theory, past the grocery store where she'd worked weekend shifts, bagging other people's groceries while wondering how she'd pay for her own, past the apartment complex where she and Cora had lived in a 1-bedroom unit until Cora was 12 and Sloane could finally afford something bigger. All those years of sacrifice, and for what? So her daughter could grow up to treat her like an obligation, a duty to be discharged with minimum effort and maximum convenience. Her phone rang as she pulled into her driveway. Call number 18. She turned off the engine and sat in the silence of her garage, listening to the phone ring until it stopped. Then ring again. Then stop again. The silence that followed felt like freedom. Nina arrived at Sloane's house on Saturday morning, carrying a briefcase and 2 cups of coffee from the expensive cafe downtown. "We need to look at your finances," she said without preamble, settling at Sloane's kitchen table like she belonged there. Sloane had spent the week ignoring her daughter's increasingly frantic calls and messages. 23 missed calls now, and 17 text messages, ranging from worried to confused to angry. She deleted them all without reading past the first few words. "I brought everything," Sloane said, pulling a manila folder from her desk drawer. Bank statements, credit card bills, utility payments, insurance forms. The paper trail of a life lived carefully within limited means. Nina spread the documents across the table with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent years organizing evidence. She put on reading glasses and began studying each statement like it might reveal state secrets. "Let's see what we're working with," she murmured, making notes on a yellow legal pad. "Here's your checking account." Nina pointed to the first statement with her pen. Monthly income from the library, minus rent, utilities, groceries, car payment. "And here's your savings account." The pen moved to another column of figures. "Not much left over." "I manage fine." "Do you?" Nina's finger traced a line of transactions. "What's this monthly transfer for $400? "Cora." Nina looked up sharply. "You give your daughter $400 a month." "She needs help sometimes. Young couples starting out, everything's expensive." "How long has this been going on?" "Since she graduated college. Maybe 6 years." Nina set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. 6 years. That's almost $30,000. The number hung in the air between them. $30,000. Enough for a new car, a down payment on a house, a year of financial security. Gone. "She's working now," Sloane said defensively. "She has a good job at the marketing firm." Then why does she need her mother's money? It was a fair question. One Sloane had asked herself many times, but never answered honestly. "She says it helps with expenses. The mortgage, car payments, insurance. Being married is expensive." Nina picked up another bank statement. This transfer here from March. What was this extra $1,000 for? "Car repair. Brad's BMW needed work." And this one from February. "Wedding expenses. They had to pay some vendor deposits for friends who were getting married." What about this one from December? "Christmas gifts. She wanted to buy nice presents for Brad's family." Nina set down the papers and looked at Sloane directly. "You're living paycheck to paycheck so your daughter can afford luxuries." It wasn't a question, and Sloane didn't try to deny it. It was true. She shopped for groceries with coupons and bought her clothes at thrift stores while Cora wore designer dresses and carried purses that cost more than Sloane made in a month. "She's my daughter." "She's a grown woman with a husband and a good job. Why does she need her mother's money?" "I don't mind helping." "Look at your account balance, Sloane." Nina's voice was sharp now, cutting through the excuses. $800 in savings. 800. What happens if your car breaks down? What happens if you get sick? What happens if the library cuts your hours? Sloane didn't answer because she didn't have an answer. She'd always figured it out before, somehow. She'd always made it work, found a way to stretch dollars and make sacrifices. But Nina was right. $800 wasn't enough. It wouldn't cover an emergency, wouldn't provide security, wouldn't protect her from the kind of financial disaster that could destroy everything she'd worked for. "You're enabling her," Nina continued. "You're making it possible for her to live beyond her means while you live below yours. I want her to be happy, at the expense of your own financial security. If necessary." Nina pulled out her phone and set it on the table. "Show me how to cancel the automatic transfer." "Nina." "Show me." Sloane's hands shook slightly as she picked up the phone and navigated to her banking app. The monthly transfer was listed under automatic payments, along with her rent and utilities. $400. sent on the 15th of every month, like clockwork. Money she couldn't afford to give, but couldn't bear to stop sending. "There," Nina said, watching as Sloane's finger hovered over the cancel button. "Delete it. What if she really needs it? Then she can ask for it, specifically. She can explain what it's for, and when she'll pay it back. She can treat it like the loan it should be instead of the entitlement it's become." Sloane pressed the button. The transfer disappeared from her account, deleted with a single tap. 6 years of automatic payments gone. "Good," Nina said, making a note on her legal pad. "Now, let's see how long it takes her to notice." The answer was 3 days. Sloane was working in the archive section, cataloging a donation of historical photographs from a local family, when her phone buzzed with a text message. "Hey, my payment didn't go through this month. Did the bank mess up?" Sloane read the message twice, then set her phone aside and continued working. The photographs were from the 1940s, showing downtown Corvallis during World War II. Soldiers in uniform walking down streets that looked nothing like the modern city. Women in Victory Garden advertisements. Children playing in neighborhoods where many of the houses had been torn down decades ago. History preserved in black and white, moments frozen in time when life was simpler and people were grateful for small kindnesses. An hour later, another text. "Mom, did you see my message about the payment?" Sloane carefully placed another photograph in its protective sleeve and moved on to the next image. A family picnic in Avery Park. Everyone dressed in their Sunday best, despite the casual setting. Genuine smiles, real joy, the kind of happiness that couldn't be bought with expensive gifts. "Can you check with your bank?" Maybe there was an error by the end of her shift. There were 4 more messages, all variations of the same question. Where was the money? What had happened to the payment? Could Sloane please fix whatever technical problem was preventing the transfer? Not once did Cora ask if her mother was okay. Not once did she express concern about anything except the missing money. Sloane drove home and made herself dinner. Leftover soup and a grilled cheese sandwich made with store-brand cheese and bread she'd bought on sale. Simple food, but satisfying in a way that expensive restaurant meals had never been. Her phone rang during dinner. She let it go to voicemail, then rang again. Another voicemail. By bedtime. There were 6 voicemails and 12 more text messages. Sloane turned off her phone and went to sleep, the silence more peaceful than any lullaby. The call came on a Tuesday morning while Sloane was shelving returns in the local history section. Her phone rang from the depths of her bag, barely audible over the library's air conditioning system. Sloane Whitaker. The voice was familiar but rougher than she remembered, worn down by years and hard living. "Yes, it's Wyatt, your brother." Sloane nearly dropped the book in her hands, a memoir by a local pioneer woman who'd homesteaded in the Oregon Territory in the 1850s. She hadn't spoken to Wyatt in 8 years, not since their last fight about responsibility and family and the different ways they'd chosen to survive their parents' abandonment. "How did you get this number?" "Phone book. You're the only S, Whitaker, in Corvallis. Still use your initial instead of your full name, I see." His voice carried the same dry humor she remembered from their childhood, back when they'd been allies against their parents' rigid expectations. "What do you want, Wyatt?" "To talk. Nina Alder tracked me down, said you might need to know some things about the Jensen family." The name hit her like cold water. "Nina called you?" "We went to high school together." She remembered I'd done some work for upscale furniture stores. "Thought I might have crossed paths with your daughter's new family." He paused, and she could hear traffic in the background. "Turns out I have." Sloane looked around the empty library section, then stepped into a private study room and closed the door. The space was small and windowless, designed for quiet research and difficult conversations. "What kind of work?" "Custom furniture. Built pieces for Pamela Jensen's stores over about 3 years. Before I got too unreliable to trust with expensive projects." There was honesty in his admission, the kind of brutal self-awareness that came from hitting bottom and having to climb back up. Are you? Sober? 2 years, 4 months, 16 days. Not that anyone's counting. His laugh was bitter but real. It took losing everything to figure out what mattered. Why are you calling me now? Because Nina told me what happened with your daughter on Mother's Day. And because I know things about Pamela Jensen that might interest you. Sloane waited, her heart beating faster than it should. She runs a nice operation on the surface, Wyatt continued. Upscale antiques, wealthy customers, good reputation in the community. Beautiful stores, expensive inventory, the kind of place where people buy $1,000 lamps like they're picking up groceries. But underneath, it's built on lies. She underreports high-value inventory to dodge taxes. Has for years, maybe decades. I saw invoices that didn't match the merchandise. Pieces worth $50,000 being recorded as $5,000. Cash sales that never made it into the official books. The words settled in Sloane's stomach like stones. You're sure about this? I helped move the inventory when she was rearranging the stores. I saw the real prices and the reported prices. I saw her instruct employees to prepare 2 sets of paperwork for expensive pieces. One for the insurance company, one for the tax authorities. Why didn't you report it? Because I was drunk most of the time and needed the work. Because she paid in cash and didn't ask questions about my references. Because I was more worried about my next bottle than anybody else's ethics. Sloane could hear the regret in his voice, the weight of choices that couldn't be undone. But you're telling me now, because you're my sister, because your daughter chose that woman over you, and because if Pamela Jensen wants to be her real mother, maybe she should handle the real problems too. That evening, Sloane called Nina at home. We need to document everything, Nina said after hearing Wyatt's information. Legal documentation. Public records, business filings, something that can't be traced back to personal grudges or family disputes. Can you do that? I spent 15 years as a legal assistant before I took the library job. I know how to research and I know how to file complaints that get attention from the right people. This isn't about revenge, isn't it? The question hung between them over the phone line. Sloane sat in her living room, looking at the photographs on her bookshelf. Cora as a baby, as a toddler, as a child on her first day of school. Smiling faces that belonged to someone who no longer existed. It's about consequences, she said finally. Same thing, sometimes. No, revenge is about hurting someone because they hurt you. Consequences are about actions having results, about choices mattering. And you think Cora's choice to disrespect you should have consequences. I think everyone's choices should have consequences, including Pamela's choice to commit tax fraud. Nina was quiet for a moment. This could destroy your daughter's new life, her marriage, her job, her social standing, everything she's worked for. She didn't work for it. She married into it. Is that what you want? To see her lose everything? Sloane looked at the photograph of Cora's college graduation, her daughter in cap and gown, beaming with pride and possibility. The daughter she'd sacrificed everything to raise. The daughter who'd given her $15 socks while giving another woman a $10,000 watch. I want her to understand what she's lost, Sloane said, and what she's chosen instead. All right then, give me 2 weeks to put together a proper complaint. Legal, documented, unshakable. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. The news broke on a Wednesday morning in September, 6 weeks after Nina had filed her meticulously documented complaint with the state tax authority. Sloane was processing new book acquisitions when Nina appeared at her desk with a printout from the local newspaper's website. Jensen Antiques under investigation for tax irregularities, Nina read from the headline. State authorities are reviewing the business practices of 3 upscale antique stores owned by Pamela Jensen following reports of underreported inventory values and possible tax evasion. The article was brief but damning. An anonymous tip had led to a formal investigation. Preliminary findings suggested systematic underreporting of high-value merchandise over several years. The stores had been temporarily closed pending a complete audit of their financial records. "That was fast," Sloan said, scanning the article. "Government works quickly when they smell unpaid taxes. They'll recover everything she owes, plus penalties and interest. Could be hundreds of thousands of dollars." The number was staggering. Hundreds of thousands in taxes, penalties, and interest on a decade of fraud. Enough to destroy not just Pamela's business, but her entire fortune. What about Cora? Nina pulled up another article on her phone. This one from a business journal that covered marketing and advertising firms. That's where it gets interesting. Pamela tried to distance herself from the investigation, blamed the fraudulent paperwork on marketing decisions made by her daughter-in-law. The words hit Sloan like ice water. After all of Pamela's talk about refinement and elegance, after all the praise about Cora being like a real daughter, she'd thrown Cora under the bus the moment her own freedom was at stake. She's protecting herself. Gets better. Cora's employer found her name on several pieces of promotional material for the stores. Tax-deductible, charitable donations that were never properly filed. Business expense deductions for events that were actually personal parties. All because Pamela wanted to use Cora's marketing expertise to make her tax fraud look legitimate. Sloan thought about all those months Nina had spent researching, documenting, cross-referencing public records and business filings. All legal, all above board, all devastating when compiled into a complete picture of systematic fraud. "The complaint I filed was completely factual," Nina continued. "Public records, business filings, witness statements from former employees. I just organized the information in a way that made it impossible to ignore. And now your daughter is learning what happens when you tie yourself to people who don't care about you, when you choose status over family, money over loyalty." Sloane's phone buzzed in her bag. A call from Cora. The first call since she'd stopped answering 3 months ago. She let it go to voicemail, then played the message on speaker. "Mom, please, you have to call me back. I know you're angry about something, but I need you right now. Everything's falling apart. The investigation, my job. Pamela won't even talk to me. Please, I need my mother." The desperation in Cora's voice was real, raw and frightened in a way Sloan hadn't heard since Cora was a child afraid of thunderstorms. "Feeling guilty?" Nina asked. Sloan looked at her friend across the desk. Nina, with her practical haircut and her sensible clothes and her complete lack of sentimentality when it came to family drama. "No," Sloan said and realized she meant it. "I'm feeling like justice finally showed up." The second call came that evening while Sloan was making dinner. She let it go to voicemail too, then listened to the message while she ate her simple meal of soup and crackers. "Mom, I don't understand why you won't talk to me, but I'm in serious trouble. They're saying I might face criminal charges for helping Pamela hide assets. I never helped her do anything illegal. I didn't even know what she was doing. Please call me back. I'm scared." Sloan deleted the message and finished her dinner. The third call came the next morning. "Mom, please, I know I did something wrong, but I don't know what it was. Can you please just tell me what I did? I'll fix it, whatever it is. I'll apologize. I'll make it right. Just please don't abandon me like everyone else has." The words stung because they were true. Everyone had abandoned Cora. Pamela, who'd used her and then thrown her away. Brad, who was probably already talking to divorce lawyers. Her employer, who'd fired her to protect their own reputation. But Sloan had been abandoned too. By her parents, when she chose love over reputation. By Cora when she chose wealth over respect. By everyone who was supposed to matter. She deleted the message and went to work, The knock came at 9:15 p.m. on a Thursday in late October. Sharp, desperate, repeated until Sloane finally set down her book and walked to the front door. Through the peephole, she could see Cora standing on the porch under the yellow glow of the porch light. Her daughter looked smaller than she remembered, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. Sloane opened the door. Cora stood there in clothes that were expensive but wrinkled, as if she'd been wearing them for days. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her makeup was smudged around her eyes. She clutched her purse, not the designer bag she'd carried to Mother's Day brunch, but a plain black leather purse that looked like something she might have owned in college. "Can I come in?" Her voice was small, uncertain in a way that reminded Sloane of the little girl who used to ask permission to have cookies before dinner. Sloane stepped aside without speaking. Cora walked past her into the living room and collapsed onto the couch, the same worn couch Pamela had judged so harshly 6 months earlier. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "I lost my job," Cora said without preamble, her hands twisted together in her lap. 2 weeks ago, the marketing firm said they couldn't have someone under federal investigation working in their client relations department. Sloane remained standing by the door, her arms crossed, waiting. "My finances are—" Cora's voice cracked. "They're completely destroyed. The lawyer fees, the accountant, trying to prove I wasn't involved in Pamela's business practices. I've spent everything I had, and I'm still facing possible criminal charges." "I see. And Brad?" The words came out in a rush, as if saying them quickly might make them hurt less. "Brad filed for separation last week. His family's lawyer advised him to distance himself from me until the investigation is resolved. He moved out of our house. Won't even return my calls." Sloane moved to her reading chair and sat down, but she didn't relax, didn't offer comfort or sympathy, just listened. "Pamela won't return my calls either. Won't answer texts. Her lawyer told my lawyer that she's prepared to testify that I had full knowledge of the underreporting, that I was a willing participant in the tax evasion scheme. And were you?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Cora looked up sharply, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "No, I never knew about the tax stuff. I just helped with marketing events and publicity photos and promotional materials. But Pamela put my name on some of the paperwork to make it look more legitimate. Now my signature is on documents that claim pieces worth $50,000 were only worth $5,000. Why are you here, Cora?" It wasn't really a question. They both knew why she was there. Cora needed help, and everyone else in her life had abandoned her. Her wealthy mother-in-law, her husband, her employers, her friends from the country club. Only one person was left. "Because I need help. I need somewhere to stay while I figure this out. Just for a few days, maybe a week, until I can find a cheaper apartment and get back on my feet." "What about your house?" "Brad kept it. His name was on the mortgage, and his parents helped with the down payment. I can't afford it anyway. Not without my job or the monthly—" She stopped abruptly, her face flushing. "The monthly payments from me." Cora looked down at her hands. "I didn't know you'd stopped them until September. I thought it was a bank error at first. When I couldn't reach you, I figured you were angry about something, but I didn't know what." "You thought I was angry, weren't you?" Sloane considered the question. Had she been angry? Yes, at first, but anger was hot and immediate, and what she felt now was cold and settled. Permanent. "I was disappointed," she said finally. "About what?" "Everything." The words settled between them like a stone dropped in still water. Everything. The socks, the watch, the wedding, the years of financial support taken for granted, the way Cora had measured her against Pamela and found her wanting. "I don't understand." "I know you don't. That's part of the problem." Sloane got up and walked to the kitchen. "I'll make tea." It was a small kindness, but the only one she was prepared to offer. She put the kettle on and pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet, the same mismatched mugs they'd used for countless conversations over the years. Homework troubles, boy problems, college stress, job interviews. But this felt different. Final, when she returned with the tea, Cora was sitting straighter, as if the familiar ritual had given her hope. "Thank you," Cora said, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic, "for letting me in, for the tea, for not hanging up on me like everyone else." "I didn't hang up on you." "You didn't answer." "No, I didn't." They sat in silence for several minutes. The same silence that had filled too many evenings during Cora's teenage years, when words felt too dangerous to speak aloud and emotions ran too deep for casual conversation. Sloane studied her daughter's face. Even exhausted and frightened, Cora was beautiful. She had good bone structure, clear skin, the kind of natural elegance that expensive clothes could enhance but not create. She would survive this. Find another job, another husband perhaps, another life built on someone else's money. But she would never understand what she'd lost. "Why didn't you call me back?" Cora asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Sloane set down her mug. The question she'd been waiting for. The question that mattered more than all the others combined. "Because you stopped being my daughter the moment you measured me against her, and I lost." The words came out calm and clear, without anger or accusation. Just fact. Cora's face crumpled. "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that." Sloane's voice remained steady. "The wedding where I wasn't refined enough for the bridal party. The Mother's Day where you gave her a $10,000 gift and gave me $15 socks. The way you introduced me as just a librarian while calling her your real mother." "I never said she was my real mother." "You didn't have to. I was trying to fit in, to be what they expected, to make them accept me. And what was I supposed to be while you were doing that?" Cora didn't answer because there was no good answer. She'd expected Sloane to remain in the background, grateful for whatever scraps of attention she received, understanding about being excluded from the important moments. "I worked 3 jobs to put you through school," Sloane continued, her voice never rising above conversational level. "I paid off your student loans without telling you because I didn't want you to worry about money. I gave you $400 a month for 6 years while I ate soup for dinner and shopped at thrift stores. And when you finally had the chance to show appreciation, to show respect, you gave me socks from a grocery store checkout line. The money didn't matter to me. I thought you knew that. The money never mattered to me either. It was what the money represented. Respect, recognition, the understanding that sacrifice deserves acknowledgement." Cora started crying, then quiet tears that she wiped away with the back of her hand like she was ashamed of them. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't think. I didn't realize you didn't think because you didn't have to think. I made sure you never had to worry about money or consequences or the cost of your choices. Can you forgive me?" The question Sloane had been expecting. The question that assumed forgiveness was automatic, that love meant accepting any behavior and moving forward without consequences. Sloane looked at her daughter, at the woman she'd raised alone, sacrificed everything for, loved unconditionally for 28 years. The woman who'd chosen wealth over loyalty, status over family, appearances over truth. The woman who'd only come home when she had nowhere else to go. "You can stay tonight," she said. "One night. Tomorrow you'll need to find somewhere else to go." "Mom, please." "One night, Cora. That's what I have left to give you." The news segment aired on a Tuesday evening in mid-November while Sloane was cooking dinner in her small kitchen. She was browning ground beef for tacos, one of her few indulgences, since she'd stopped sending money to Cora when her phone rang. Nina, calling from her apartment across town. "Turn on Channel 7, Nina said without preamble. "Right now." Sloane grabbed the remote and switched to the local news channel. The anchor was introducing a story about recent business developments in downtown Corvallis. A historic building on 3rd Street has changed hands following a recent asset seizure, the anchor said, her voice professionally neutral. The property that formerly housed Jensen Antiques has been purchased by a local investment group and will be converted into a community archive and vintage restoration studio. The camera cut to exterior shots of Pamela's former flagship store. The same store where Cora had shopped for expensive gifts, where Pamela had built her reputation in the antique world, where wealthy customers had come to buy status symbols and conversation pieces. The new owner is Sloane Whitaker, a longtime local librarian and archivist who plans to transform the space into a resource for community education and historical preservation. Sloane's professional headshot appeared on screen, the same photo the library used for their staff directory. She looked competent and serious, the kind of person who got things done without fanfare. Whitaker says the facility will provide archival services for local historians and host educational workshops for students and community members interested in preserving local heritage. The camera moved inside the building, now empty of Pamela's expensive inventory. Sloane stood in the center of the main showroom, explaining her vision to the reporter. She looked confident, purposeful, like someone who belonged in the space. We want to create a place where people can come to research their family histories, learn about local heritage, and connect with the past in meaningful ways, she was saying. This building has been part of Corvallis history for over a century. Now it will help preserve that history for future generations. The segment showed architectural drawings of the proposed renovation, reading rooms where the expensive furniture displays had been, research stations where antique jewelry had once glittered in locked cases, children's education areas where Persian rugs had covered polished floors. The Witt and Company archive is expected to open early next year, the anchor concluded. The project is being funded through a combination of small business loans and community development grants. The phone rang again as soon as the segment ended. This time it was Wyatt. "I saw the news," he said, his voice carrying a mixture of admiration and awe. "When did you buy the building?" "Last month." Nina found it in the asset seizure listings. The state was liquidating Pamela's assets to cover her tax debt and legal fees. "How did you afford it?" "The holding company Nina set up. We used her legal research as part of our business plan, showed the bank how we could turn the space into a profitable community resource. Got approved for a small business loan with favorable terms. You planned this." It wasn't a question. Wyatt knew his sister well enough to recognize long-term strategy when he saw it. "I saw an opportunity to twist the knife." Sloane considered his words while she finished cooking dinner. Was that what this was? Revenge disguised as community service. "An opportunity to build something meaningful," she said finally. "Something that will last longer than expensive watches and designer clothes." 3 days later, a package arrived at Sloane's house. No return address, just her name written in elegant script on expensive stationery. Inside was a small wrapped box tied with a ribbon that had clearly been salvaged from some other occasion. Sloane opened it carefully, though she already knew what she would find: the $15 socks, freshly laundered and folded with tissue paper. They looked even cheaper now than they had on Mother's Day. The pink stitching faded, and one of the letters starting to come loose. The note was brief, written on letterhead from a law office. "I believe these belong to you. Return to sender. PJ." Sloane smiled, the first genuine smile she'd felt in months. She folded the socks back into their tissue paper and put them in her dresser drawer next to her work clothes and sensible undergarments. They would make excellent cleaning rags when they finally fell apart completely. 8 months later. Sloane stood in the main reading room of the Witt and Company archive, watching a group of 4th graders examine historical photographs under Nina's patient guidance. "This is downtown Corvallis in 1952, Nina was saying, pointing to a black and white image mounted behind protective glass. "Can you spot the differences between then and now?" The children pressed close to the display case, their faces bright with curiosity. They pointed excitedly at old-fashioned cars, different storefronts, people dressed in vintage, clothing that looked like costumes to their young eyes. The movie theater was right there, one boy said, pressing his finger against the glass. My grandpa said he saw his first movie there when he was my age. The soda fountain was next door, added a girl with pigtails. My great-grandma worked there during high school. Their teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, took notes for a follow-up lesson about local history and family connections. She'd been bringing her class every month since the archive opened, using the resources to help her students understand their connection to the community's past. The back workshop. White was putting finishing touches on a display case he'd built for documents from the Oregon Territory period. His work had become precise and beautiful again, the kind of craftsmanship that came from steady hands and a clear mind. 3.5 years sober now, with work that mattered and a relationship with his sister that had been rebuilt on honesty instead of obligation. The archive had been open for 6 months and was already an essential part of the community. School groups came weekly to learn about local history. Families researched their genealogies using records and resources Sloan had carefully collected and preserved. History buffs spent hours examining old newspapers, city records, and photograph collections. Graduate students from the university used the space for research projects. Local writers found inspiration in the stories of pioneer families and forgotten businesses. Elderly residents donated their own collections of letters, photographs, and documents, knowing they would be preserved for future generations. Sloan had found her place, not just professionally, but personally. For the first time in years, she felt useful, respected, valued for her knowledge and dedication rather than tolerated as an obligation. The morning mail arrived during the lunch break. Bills, promotional materials, grant applications, and a personal letter addressed in handwriting she recognized immediately Cora's penmanship hadn't changed. Still, the careful cursive she'd learned in elementary school, with loops that were too perfect and letters that leaned slightly to the right. Sloan held the envelope for a long moment, feeling its weight. Substantial paper, expensive. Cora had probably bought stationery specifically for this letter, the way she'd always bought new clothes for important occasions. The postmark was from Portland. Cora had moved there after the criminal charges were dropped. Lack of evidence that she'd knowingly participated in the tax fraud scheme. She'd found work at a smaller marketing firm, making half her previous salary, but enough to survive in a studio apartment in a decent neighborhood. Brad had finalized their divorce 6 months ago. No children, limited shared assets after the legal fees, a clean break that left both of them free to start over. He'd remarried already, according to the social announcements Nina occasionally showed Sloan, a woman from his social circle who came with her own money and no legal complications. Sloan walked to her desk in the administrative office, past historical displays and research stations where people were quietly working on their own family mysteries. She pulled out a fresh envelope and wrote Cora's return address on the front in her own careful handwriting. Without opening the letter, she slipped it inside the new envelope and sealed it with tape from her desk on her bookshelf. Between archival guides and local history texts sat a small wooden plaque Wyatt had made for her office. He'd carved it from reclaimed wood and finished it with care, the letters burned into the grain by hand. Respect is never owed. It's earned. Sloan looked at the plaque, then at the unopened letter in her hands. Some bridges, once burned, were never meant to be rebuilt. Some relationships, once broken by disrespect and ingratitude, couldn't be repaired with apologies and desperation. She had built a new life from the ashes of her old one. A life based on her own worth rather than someone else's needs. A life where her contributions were valued and her sacrifices acknowledged. She didn't need Cora's apology or her belated understanding. She didn't need forgiveness or reconciliation or the complicated emotions that came with family relationships. She needed peace. And she had found it. Sloan dropped the unopened letter into the outgoing mail slot and returned to her work. helping people discover their own histories in the archive she had built from determination and self-respect. Outside, the autumn rain fell steadily on the streets of Corvallis, washing the world clean.